Toddler finds injured German Shepherd. Her reaction left viewers in tears. It started with silence, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that screams something is terribly wrong. And then, one tiny act of courage shattered that silence. What this little girl discovered behind an abandoned wall shocked her family, her town, and eventually the entire nation. Get ready. This is not just a story, it's a heartbeat. The morning had that kind of gentle quiet that only comes in early spring, when the world feels like it's waking up slowly, stretching beneath a pale sky. Sunlight filtered softly over the neighborhood, catching on beads of dew that clung to every blade of grass. The air carried the faint, clean scent of rain from the night before, cool enough to nip at the nose but warm enough to promise the day would be kind. In the Avery family's backyard, 3-year-old Lily crouched beside the garden fence, her toy bucket balanced between her knees. She was scooping handfuls of damp earth and tiny pebbles into it, humming a tune only she knew. The yellow ribbon in her hair bobbed as she leaned forward, her boots squelching faintly in the wet ground. The neighborhood was still at this hour. A distant hum of birdsong drifted over the fence, mingling with the soft creak of a neighbor's wind chime. Somewhere far off, a car door closed, but here it was just Lily, her little bucket, and the soft scratch of her mittened hands in the dirt. She was mid-scoop when she heard it. At first, she almost missed it, just a thread of sound woven into the breeze. A faint, high whimper, so delicate it could have been nothing more than the wind snagging on the hedge. Lily froze, her small head tilting. There it was again. This time, it was clearer, still soft, still fragile, but carrying something else now, pain. She set her bucket down slowly, the plastic making a hollow sound against the grass. Her brown eyes narrowed in thought, the way they always did when she was curious. Turning toward the far corner of the yard, she walked in the direction of the sound, her little boots leaving prints in the dew. The fence here was older, the boards grayed and splintering in places, and beyond it, thick hedges pressed close together, forming a narrow alleyway between the properties. Lily paused at the entrance to that narrow space. The air seemed cooler here, the scent of rain sharper. She could hear it again, the whimper, low and broken. It tugged at her in a way she didn't have words for, something deep and simple, the way a child feels sadness without needing to understand it. She stepped into the space between the hedges, the damp leaves brushing her sleeves. The ground was uneven, roots pushing through the soil beneath her feet. She had to duck once to pass under a sagging branch, her ribbon catching on a twig before she freed it with a little tug. And then she saw him. Behind a patch of overgrown hedge, where the ground dipped slightly, lay a German Shepherd. He was curled awkwardly on his side, as if the position had been chosen out of exhaustion rather than comfort. His fur was matted and dull, patches of it tangled with burrs. One of his front legs was bent at an odd angle, and his breaths came shallow and slow. For a moment, Lily simply stared. She had seen dogs before, of course. Her grandparents had one, but never like this. This dog's eyes opened just enough to meet hers, dark and glassy, the kind of eyes that held too much pain for a child to fully understand. Her first instinct might have been to run and get her parents, but something in his gaze held her there. Instead of fear, she felt a soft, warm thread of resolve winding through her. She stepped closer, her boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, and crouched until she was low enough that their eyes were level. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice carrying a quiet promise that came from somewhere deep in her little heart. "I'll help you." The German Shepherd didn't move, but his tail gave the smallest twitch, a barely there acknowledgement, like he had understood. Lily had grown up in a home where love was not something spoken only in words, but shown in every little act. Her parents, Claire and James, wrapped her world in warmth, morning cuddles before the day began, bedtime stories told with gentle voices, and the kind of laughter that spilled easily over shared meals. Her grandparents visited often, filling the small house with the smell of fresh-baked bread and the sound of old family songs. Even at 3 years old, Lily had a way of noticing the world that made adults pause. Where other children might race past a flower without a glance, she would stop to crouch beside it, brushing her fingertips gently over the petals. Her parents had seen it many times, like the afternoon at the town pond when Lily had stood at the water's edge with a small bag of seed, feeding the ducks one by one. She'd giggled as they waddled closer, but never tossed the food carelessly. Each piece was offered deliberately, like a tiny gift. There had been the summer day she'd found a butterfly on the porch, one wing bent awkwardly. While her parents might have hurried her inside, Lily had crouched beside it, her brow furrowed with concern. She'd cupped her small hands loosely around it until her father found a safe place for it in the garden. It was this gentle streak, paired with the natural curiosity of a toddler, that made her parents both cautious and trusting. They kept her world safe, the yard fenced and secure, but they also gave her room to explore within those boundaries. The rule was simple: she could play outside as long as the back door stayed open and they could hear her if they called. That morning was no different. Claire was in the kitchen, slicing fruit for breakfast, while James readied the coffee. The smell of toast drifted through the air. Every so often, one of them would glance toward the window, catching sight of Lily's small figure crouched near the fence, busy with her toy bucket. They didn't worry. This was her little kingdom, a world they believed held no danger. Outside, in that narrow alley between the hedges, Lily had forgotten about her bucket entirely. Her gaze was fixed on the German shepherd lying half-hidden in the shadows. Even in the muted morning light, she could see that something was wrong. His coat, which should have been rich and glossy, was dulled to a lifeless brown-black. Dirt clung to it in thick patches, and there were burrs tangled deep in the fur along his flank. His chest rose and fell with effort, and one of his front legs lay twisted in a way that made her frown without understanding why. Most telling of all were his eyes. They were open, yes, but heavy, as if it took effort to keep them that way. There was a depth there, tired, uncertain, but not entirely hopeless. Lily, with the instinct that children sometimes carry without knowing, didn't rush forward. She stopped just far enough that she could see him clearly but not startle him. Her knees bent as she lowered herself onto the damp ground, the chill of it soaking through her leggings. "Hi," she said softly, almost as though she were introducing herself. The sound of her voice made one of his ears twitch. She kept talking, her voice slow and even, telling him about her toy bucket, the wet grass, and how her mother was making toast inside. The dog didn't move except for the faintest shift of his gaze, but she thought, just for a second, that he was listening. There was fear in his stillness. Lily could feel it. But there was also something else. A question, maybe. A waiting. And so she stayed there, her small hands resting in her lap, speaking softly to a stranger who happened to be a dog, not knowing that every second she sat there, she was becoming the first safe thing he'd known in a very long time. Lily sat there for another moment, just long enough for the cool dampness to start creeping through her leggings. She could see the dog's chest rise and fall in slow, uneven breaths, and something in her small heart told her he was cold. Really cold. She thought about the blanket that was folded neatly on the porch bench, the one her grandmother had knitted for her. It was soft, with squares of pale yellow and green, and Lily often wrapped it around her shoulders on chilly mornings. Without another word, she pushed herself to her feet and darted back toward the yard. Her boots thudded lightly over the grass, then clattered on the wooden porch steps. She grabbed the blanket, bunching it up in her arms as she turned to run back. When she reached the gap between the hedges again, the German shepherd was still there. His head had lifted slightly, and his dark eyes followed her movements. His tail gave the faintest thump against the ground, more a shadow of a wag than the real thing. It was enough to make her smile. "It's okay," she whispered again as she knelt beside him. She unfolded the blanket as best she could, the edges catching on stray branches. Her small hands worked carefully, laying it over his back, tucking it gently around his sides the way she'd seen her mother tuck her into bed. The dog flinched at the touch at first, a low breath leaving his nose, but when she kept her hands light and slow, he relaxed just a little. His head lowered again to the ground, his eyes never leaving hers. Inside the kitchen, Claire glanced up from slicing strawberries and frowned. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of her daughter rushing across the yard again, this time without her bucket. She moved to the back door, leaning out. "Lily? What are you up to out there?" Lily didn't answer right away. She was busy smoothing the blanket over the dog. The German Shepherd's fur felt rough beneath her fingers, cold in some places where the matted hair had been pressed against the wet earth for too long. Claire stepped onto the porch. "Honey, who are you talking to?" Lily turned just enough to call back, "He's hurt." Claire blinked, caught off guard. "Who's hurt?" Lily didn't explain, at least not in the way her mother expected. She simply said, "Come see." Claire's first thought was that her daughter had found a stuffed animal she'd left outside, or maybe a squirrel that had wandered too close to the fence. She stepped into the yard, brushing her hands on her jeans as she walked toward the hedge. But as soon as she stepped into the narrow space, the sight before her froze her in place. The German Shepherd lifted his head just enough to watch her approach, his ears twitching but no growl rising in his throat. "Oh my gosh," Claire murmured, her voice tight with surprise. "Lily, you need to step back." Lily shook her head gently. "He's okay. He's cold." Claire's mind jumped between concern for her daughter's safety and the obvious distress of the animal in front of her. She took a careful step closer, keeping her voice low. From the open back door, James's voice carried out. "Everything all right?" "No," Claire called back, her tone sharp now. "Come here." Now. A moment later, he appeared, pulling on his jacket as he crossed the yard. When he reached the hedge and saw the scene, he stopped mid-step. The dog looked worse up close, mud caked into his fur, one leg held stiffly as though it couldn't bear weight, his ribs faintly visible under the dull coat. James crouched slowly, letting his gaze meet the dog's before speaking. "He's in bad shape," he said quietly. "We need to get him warm and call a vet." Claire glanced at Lily, who was still kneeling just outside the dog's reach. "Sweetheart, I need you to go inside now." Lily hesitated, her eyes flicking from her mother to the shepherd. "Can I stay?" she asked softly. James gave her a measured look, then nodded once. "You can stay, but you have to do exactly what we say. And no sudden movements, all right?" Lily nodded, her hand still resting lightly on the edge of the blanket she'd placed over the dog. In that moment, with the cold morning air wrapping around them and the quiet of the neighborhood holding steady, there was an unspoken agreement. This dog wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was someone they were going to help. James stayed crouched for a moment longer, reading the dog's body language. The shepherd's ears flicked back slightly, and his breathing quickened, but there was no sign of aggression, just pain, uncertainty, and exhaustion. "All right, buddy," James murmured, keeping his tone low and steady. "We're not here to hurt you." Claire slipped back toward the house and returned a minute later with a shallow bowl of water and a plate with leftover chicken from last night's dinner. She set them down a few feet from the dog and stepped back. The shepherd's eyes darted between the humans and the food. For a long moment, he didn't move, as if weighing whether to trust them. Then, with visible effort, he pushed himself up onto 3 legs, keeping the injured one tucked close. His steps were shaky, but the smell of the chicken seemed to pull him forward. Lily watched in quiet awe as the dog lowered his head to drink. His tongue moved slowly at first, then faster, as if he hadn't tasted clean water in days. When he reached the chicken, he sniffed it once before eating in small, careful bites, as though savoring every piece. "That's it," James encouraged softly. "You're okay now." But getting him inside was another problem. The shepherd was big, easily 70 pounds, and every step seemed to drain him. James tried coaxing him toward the porch, but after a few paces, the dog's legs trembled, and he lowered himself back to the ground with a soft whine. James exhaled sharply, glancing toward the house. "We're going to have to carry him, or something close to it." Claire's brow furrowed. "You can't lift that much weight without help, and we can't risk hurting him more." James's eyes flicked toward the side of the house, where an old green wheelbarrow leaned against the shed. "Wait here," he said, jogging off. When he returned, he had the wheelbarrow lined with 2 thick towels and one of their big fleece blankets. "If we can get him into this, we can wheel him to the porch without jostling him too much." It took patience. James and Claire moved slowly, speaking to the shepherd in gentle tones. James slid his arms under the dog's chest and hindquarters, lifting just enough for Claire to guide him into the wheelbarrow. The dog winced, letting out a low, pained sound, but didn't snap or resist. Lily immediately moved to the side, her small hand finding the dog's paw. "I'll walk with you," she said simply. James began the careful trip across the yard, the wheelbarrow creaking under the weight. Every bump in the ground made the shepherd shift slightly, his eyes closing as though each jolt drained him further. Lily kept pace beside them, her gaze fixed on the dog's face, whispering soft things only he could hear. Halfway to the porch, the sound of voices reached them. A couple of neighbors had noticed the scene and wandered over, concern etched on their faces. "Is he yours?" one woman asked. "No," Claire replied, glancing up briefly. "We just found him like this. He's badly hurt. We're getting him inside until a vet can come." Another neighbor pulled out a phone. "I'll call the clinic. They know me there. They'll come right away." James kept moving, the weight of the wheelbarrow making his arms ache. Lily stayed close, her hand never leaving the shepherd's paw. The dog's breathing was still shallow, but he seemed calmer now, the tension in his body easing with every step closer to shelter. As they reached the porch steps, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. James looked up to see dark clouds gathering fast, the soft blue of the morning swallowed by an oncoming storm. "Perfect timing," he muttered under his breath. "Let's get him inside before the rain hits." Together, they eased the shepherd from the wheelbarrow and onto a thick blanket spread on the porch floor. Claire ran inside for more towels while Lily crouched beside the dog, brushing a strand of wet fur from his face. "You made it," she whispered as the first cool drops of rain began to fall, speckling the wooden boards around them. The first low rumble of thunder rolled somewhere beyond the neighborhood as the rain began to tap softly against the porch roof. Lily's little yellow umbrella wobbled slightly in her small hands, but she kept it steady over the German shepherd lying on the blanket, shielding him from the cool drops drifting in from the wind. The distant sound of tires crunching over wet gravel drew everyone's eyes toward the street. A dark blue SUV eased to a stop at the curb, and a tall man stepped out, his leather jacket weathered from years of use, a heavy duffel bag swinging at his side. Claire hurried down the steps to meet him, relief breaking across her face. "Dr. Harris, thank you for coming so quickly," she said, her voice carrying both urgency and gratitude. He didn't waste a second. "Where is he?" he asked, scanning the yard as he approached. Claire turned and led him toward the porch, where the shepherd lifted his head ever so slightly at the new voice before letting it sink back down again. In 2 long strides, Dr. Harris was kneeling beside him, setting his bag down and beginning his examination without hesitation. His hands moved with the confidence of years in the field, checking pulse, parting fur to look at gums, tracing fingers gently along the injured leg. The dog flinched but didn't resist. Claire and James hovered nearby, trying to read the vet's face. "Is he going to make it?" James asked, his voice low. Dr. Harris didn't answer immediately. Instead, he sat back a little, looking them both in the eyes before speaking. "He's dehydrated, severely underweight, and these cuts on his leg are deep. Looks like he got caught on something sharp and was stuck there for a while. He's also showing signs of long-term neglect. But his gaze softened as it returned to the shepherd. He's a fighter. With proper care, he has a real chance. The rain grew heavier, drumming on the roof above them. Without a word, Lily adjusted her umbrella so it better covered the dog's head. Dr. Harris caught the gesture and gave her the faintest smile. "That's a big help, young lady," he said. She nodded seriously, as if it were her official duty. From his bag, he pulled antiseptic, gauze, and rolls of bandage, setting them within easy reach. His movements were deliberate and calm as he began cleaning the wounds, speaking in a low, steady voice whenever the dog flinched. Through all of it, the shepherd's eyes stayed fixed on Lily, as if her quiet presence was the only thing holding the pieces of his trust together. Then, as Dr. Harris paused to reach for a fresh bandage, the dog made a small effort, lifting his head just enough to press his nose against Lily's hand. A slow, deliberate lick followed, and she smiled faintly, whispering something only he could hear. Claire's breath caught, and James's hand came to rest on her shoulder. Neither of them spoke, but they knew this was a moment worth holding on to, a fragile bond forming between a wounded soul and a child who simply refused to look away. Once the leg was wrapped, Dr. Harris checked the rest of the shepherd's body for additional injuries, then sat back on his heels. "He'll need fluids, antibiotics, and somewhere warm to rest. I can take him to my clinic now, or, if you prefer, I can leave him here overnight and come back in the morning. Moving him in this weather might cause more harm than good." Claire didn't hesitate. She glanced at Lily, still crouched with the umbrella, and then back to the vet. "He stays," she said firmly. "We'll make him comfortable." With a nod, Dr. Harris pulled a collapsible four-stand from his bag. He shaved a small patch of fur on the dog's front leg, cleaned the skin, and inserted the catheter in one smooth motion. "James, hold his shoulders steady. Claire, keep the line covered," he instructed. Lily leaned in with her umbrella, making sure not a drop of rain touched the forebag. Slowly, the fluid began to drip, and the dog's breathing eased just a little. The sound of quiet conversation rose from the railing, where a few neighbors had gathered, drawn by curiosity and concern. One arrived with a folded quilt, another with towels still warm from the dryer. In minutes, the porch had transformed into a makeshift rescue space, with everyone doing something, anything, they could to help. "What should we call him?" Lily asked suddenly, her eyes never leaving the shepherd's face. "He needs a strong name." Claire looked at her daughter. "We don't know his real one, but we can give him something for now." "Captain," Lily said after a pause, her voice certain, "because he's leading himself home." Dr. Harris smiled at that. "Captain it is." He drew up a syringe of antibiotics. "This might sting," he told the dog softly before administering it. The shepherd didn't protest, only blinked slowly, still watching Lily. A gust of wind sent a spray of rain onto the porch, and James shifted to block it, shielding the forebag with his body. "How long will the fluids take?" he asked. "About an hour," Dr. Harris replied. "Then you can start him on broth, just small amounts." Almost on cue, Lily's grandmother appeared from the doorway holding a steaming mug. "Chicken broth," she said. "No salt." "Perfect." Dr. Harris cooled a spoonful and offered it. The shepherd sniffed, hesitated, then took it. Lily clapped once in quiet triumph. "He likes it." The vet smiled and handed her the spoon. "Your turn," slow and steady. She leaned in, offering one careful spoonful after another, her concentration absolute. By the time the mug was empty, Captain gave a long, heavy sigh, his eyes half closing. The rain softened, turning into a mist that blurred the edge of the yard. Dr. Harris finished his notes, packed his supplies, and stood. "I'll check back tonight. Call me if anything changes." Then he was gone, his SUV disappearing down the wet road. Inside the porch, James lowered the blinds to block the wind, and Claire adjusted the quilt around Captain. Lily stayed right where she was, her small hand resting gently on his paw. The dog's eyes drifted closed, his breathing even and calm. For the first time since they'd found him, the air felt still, the danger pushed back. Outside, the rain washed the morning clean. Inside, a wounded life finally rested in safety. By late afternoon, the storm had drifted east, leaving behind a pale, washed-out sky and the clean scent of rain-soaked earth. Captain, or rather, the shepherd, was lying on the quilt by the fireplace, his breathing steady, eyes half closed. Dr. Harris returned with a portable scanner, his expression calm but purposeful. "Let's see if he's got a microchip," he said, kneeling beside the dog. Lily was right there too, her small hand still resting gently on his paw. The vet passed the scanner slowly over the dog's shoulder blades until a faint beep broke the silence. Claire leaned forward. "Does it say anything?" Dr. Harris glanced at the small display, then gave a quiet nod. "It does. His name is Rex. He's been reported missing for 4 months." The words seemed to hang in the air, the name settling over the room like it had always belonged here. James frowned. "Missing? From where?" The vet scrolled through the details. "Registered to a Mr. Harold Bennett, lives in the next town over. He filed a missing dog report in February, said Rex vanished from his fenced yard. No sightings since." Claire exchanged a glance with James. "For months," she murmured, looking down at the now sleeping shepherd. His ears twitched faintly at the sound of his name. Dr. Harris stepped outside to make the call, and a short while later, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. An elderly man stepped out slowly, gripping the edge of the car door as if steadying himself against whatever he was about to see. His coat hung loosely from his frame, his face lined not just from age, but from months of worry. Claire met him at the steps. "Mr. Bennett?" He nodded once, his voice caught in his throat. "You found him?" Claire led him inside. The moment the old man's voice reached the shepherd's ears, something changed. Rex's head lifted, his gaze sharpening with recognition. His tail began to thump weakly against the quilt. "Rex, boy," Mr. Bennett said, his voice trembling as he knelt. The dog pushed himself upright, limping forward until his head rested in the man's lap. The reunion was quiet but full, soft sounds of relief, a hand moving over fur like it was relearning every inch, and eyes brimming with tears that finally spilled. "Oh, what have they done to you?" Mr. Bennett whispered, seeing the bandaged leg, the jut of ribs under the coat. Rex whined softly, leaning his full weight against him. Dr. Harris crouched nearby. "He's going to be all right, but this didn't happen overnight. Someone neglected him, maybe worse." Mr. Bennett's jaw tightened. "He was taken. One night, the gate latch was broken. I searched every day. I thought he couldn't finish." James, standing near the mantel, asked quietly, "Could he have been stolen?" The vet nodded. "Police will want to know. For months gone, in this condition, it's possible he was taken and abandoned when he became injured." A murmur of voices followed as Dr. Harris made the call to the local police department, explaining the situation. Lily, who had been sitting quietly at the edge of the quilt, listened with wide eyes. She reached out and slid her arms around Rex's neck, holding him close. "No one will hurt you again," she whispered into his fur. The shepherd closed his eyes at the sound of her voice, the steady beat of his tail matching the soft rhythm of her words. Mr. Bennett looked up at Claire and James. "I don't know how to thank you. You brought him back to me." Claire shook her head. "Your Rex came to us. We just made sure he wasn't alone." The police arrived soon after, speaking briefly with Mr. Bennett and Dr. Harris. They took notes, promised to follow up, and left with the quiet assurance that the matter would be investigated. In the warm glow of the living room, it felt almost strange to think of cold intentions, of someone taking a loyal dog from the man who loved him only to leave him injured and starving. But right there, in that moment, Rex was home again. As the evening settled in, Mr. Bennet stayed by Rex's side, telling stories about the dog's younger days, the way he used to chase autumn leaves across the yard, how he'd sit patiently while Mr. Bennet tied his shoes, how he once refused to leave the porch until the old man came inside on a snowy night. Lily listened with the rapt attention only a child can give, her fingers idly stroking the shepherd's fur. When it was time to go, Mr. Bennet promised he would give Rex all the care he needed to heal. But as he rose to leave, Rex's gaze darted between him and Lily, as though some part of him already knew he'd gained more than one family that day. The weeks that followed moved in the slow, steady rhythm of healing. Spring settled fully over the town, trading the chill of March for the soft warmth of April afternoons. In Mr. Bennet's home, Rex regained his strength, his coat regaining its shine, his gait growing steadier with each passing day. The deep cuts on his leg faded into thin scars, marks of what he'd endured, but not of what defined him. And every few days, without fail, a silver sedan would pull into Claire and James's driveway, and Rex would bound out, tail high, to find Lily in the yard. On one of those afternoons, Lily was kneeling in the grass, building a careful arrangement of tiny daisies in the lid of her toy bucket. Rex lay nearby, stretched out in the shade, his head lifted just enough to keep her in sight. He no longer needed the constant watchfulness he'd had in those first days, but it had become his habit, his unspoken promise, to always know where she was. Every now and then, her high, clear laughter would break the quiet, and his tail would give a slow, contented thump against the ground. From the porch, Claire watched them, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. James stepped out beside her, leaning on the railing. 4 months in the dark, he said softly, and now look at him. Claire nodded, her gaze never leaving the yard. And it all started because she wouldn't ignore a sound most people wouldn't even hear. She remembered that morning vividly, the quiet, the faint whimper, the sight of her daughter disappearing behind the hedges. What could have been nothing had turned into everything. James glanced at her. Makes you think how small moments can save a life. Under the soft green canopy of spring leaves, Lily set her bucket aside and stood. Rex's ears flicked toward her, and he rose to his feet, following as she wandered toward the flowering tree at the edge of the yard. Pale pink blossoms swayed gently in the breeze, their petals drifting like slow snowflakes to the grass below. Lily reached up to touch a low branch, then turned to throw her arms around Rex's neck. He lowered his head, resting his chin against her shoulder with the patience of a friend who understood this was where he belonged. For a moment, time seemed to still, just a small girl and a dog, framed beneath a crown of blossoms, the soft hum of bees in the air. Later, as the light began to fade, Claire would think about how easily this story could have ended differently. But it hadn't, because a child's kindness had outweighed fear, because a loyal animal had found the will to trust again, and because strangers had come together when it mattered most. And as the screen would fade to black for those watching from far away, the gentle voice of the narrator would invite them to share their own rescue stories, to look for those small moments that can change a life, and to remember that every act of care, no matter how small, leaves a mark. Some things can't be explained, but they still make us believe. What did this story make you think? Let us know in the comments below. Like, share, and subscribe for more. Until next time, keep your heart open to the unexpected.